Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just want to give a little bit more time for a few more people to enter the room. If anyone's interested, you could share where you are dialing in from today in the chat box, which you can see in the toolbar. All right, so I see that you're all coming in from the south, which I would imagine is much warmer than where we are right now. All right, great. So I think we will go ahead and get started. It looks here now. So, good afternoon to most of you, maybe good morning to some of you. I'm Nicole Jarvis, Assistant Director of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. For those of you dialing in from your phone, please let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the number that you're dialing in from. This way, we're able to confirm your attendance and make sure that you are able to receive all of the relevant follow-up after today's webinar. Now, if you're new to Cancer and Careers, we were founded in 2001 to support every person in every industry and every job so that they can thrive in their work and their life after a diagnosis. Cancer and Careers also works with companies to develop their internal systems of support for employees navigating illness and work. Here is a list of all of the free programs and services that we offer for people with cancer, as well as their caregivers, healthcare providers, and coworkers. These include a comprehensive website and library of publications available in English and Spanish, career coaching, resume review, technology assistance grants, access to experts for one-on-one support, and educational events. I'll be back after the presentation today to tell you a bit more about our upcoming events as well. Now, some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you do experience any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please refer to our Zoom user guide, which is linked on the slide and is being shared in the chat right now as well. Alternatively, you can reach out to Zoom support using the contact information on this slide. Also, please note that today's presentation is copyrighted. Therefore, the use of AI assistance and/or transcribing and recording devices of any kind by attendees is not allowed. Those found to be using AI or other recording transcription software during CAC programming will be removed from the event. They may be permitted to return without AI recording and transcription software. Also, real-time closed captioning is available for today's event for those who need it, and a captioned recording of this webinar will be archived on our website following the session. In order to request an additional reasonable accommodation, please send an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org at least 24 hours before the next live session. For those of you on the call who are seeking continuing education credit, this slide lists all of the organizations who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. Please note that you are required to complete both the evaluation and pass the post-test to be eligible for CEs or PDCs. More information on how to access those will be shared throughout the webinar, and if you're unable to complete those today, a follow-up email with the links will be sent tomorrow by 5 p.m. Eastern. And for everyone here, please know that we love hearing from you, both during our live webinar and after. As many of you know, Zoom has a lot of great features that you can use to interact with today's event as it is happening. In your features panel, you'll see a chat box, which many of you have already used. You can feel free to use this to communicate with our speakers, CAC staff, and other attendees. An important thing to note, however, is that the chat box is not private. So it will show your first and last name. So that is something to be mindful of when and if you decide to use it. Also, if you have any questions about today's content that you would like our presenters to address at the end of the session, please submit them by clicking the Q&A box below, not the chat box. We do know the importance of privacy, so there is the option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer everyone's questions. But please be patient. If we do not get to your question today, please send us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org. Additionally, Your feedback on our program evaluations truly means the world to us. All of us at CIC are dedicated to creating the best possible programs, and truly it's through hearing from you, your insights and observations, what worked, what didn't, that we're able to really learn how to make them the best that they can be. Not only do your voices help make a big difference in helping us to help others, but sharing your experiences with our funders, always anonymously, does illustrate the true impact of their support, and it allows us to continue offering these webinars free of charge. Now, you can access the evaluation for today's webinar using this QR code or via the link being shared in the chat box, and it will also be sent via email tomorrow. So we do want to thank you in advance for taking time to share your thoughts with us. Now, thanks in part to support from Genentech and P&G Beauty, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer this 11th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about the work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, I'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing all resources and services free of charge. Now, you've probably heard the phrase self-care before, but what exactly is it? Is it just a buzzword that gets tossed around on social media or something that can actually make a difference in your life? And how can it help improve your experience of balancing work and life after a cancer diagnosis? To explore all of these questions and more, I'm thrilled to introduce Wade Iwata, who is a neuro-oncology social worker at Seattle Children's Hospital and a long-term friend of Cancer and Careers. Wade has spent his entire career working in oncology and has worked with patients and survivors of all cancer diagnoses, providing support to them and their families and connection within the cancer community. Now, without further ado, I turn it over to Wade, and I will be joining you all for the Q&A following the presentation. Welcome, Wade.
Thanks, Nicole. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this talk. I'm really excited to be here with you all, and just kind of talk about self-care and just give some real practical approaches to what it is and what it isn't. I know this probably isn't the best way to start a talk, but I actually want to engage you all in the chat and kind of have you all say one or two words that you think about or give you common images of what you believe self-care is. I have some images that I put up on the next slide, but kind of want to see if it's in line with kind of what you guys are thinking about when you hear the word self-care. What are the words or images that come to mind for you? All right, hard. Yes, Deb, I agree with you. It is hard. Peace, beach, rest, lots of things. Okay, I'm feeling a little bit more confident in my presentation. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Thanks to all of these things, sleep, mind, body, soul, care. Yes, all of these things, great, bring up great images of what I think are common images of what we think about when we think about self-care. And went one too far. So these are kind of the images that I pulled up. I think, again, similar to what a lot of people are thinking. I think that there's this idea of peace, calm, your soul, care, balance. All of these things are kind of, I think, represented in these images here. And I think these are typically what people think about when they do think about self-care. And so I also think that these are often common misunderstandings of what self-care is. So I think that there are this idea that it is this new agey kind of practice, or that it's not something that like you need, that you're doing okay in your life, that it doesn't apply to you. I think that there's this idea around self-care that it has to be positive. We put this toxic positivity in here because for many people, I think that they feel that you have to have that positive outcome for it to be considered self-care. I think for a lot of people, there's this idea that it is very expensive and you can't participate in it, or that there is one right way or one way to do self-care. I don't believe that self-care is prescriptive. I don't believe it's expensive. I don't believe it has to be positive. I do believe it applies to everybody. And I think that there are many different ways that self-care can take shape. So I think to get kind of us all on the same page, this is kind of the definition of what self-care is. It's, the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. I think when you look at this, the number two here, they add this kind of part at the end that says, in particular, during periods of stress. And I think that is really an important time when self-care comes into practice and really is helpful for us. So as we start to think about self-care, the SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, it's a part of the government. Years ago, they put out this guide, a step-by-step guide to wellness, which I think it helps to illustrate, I think, the different ways that we can incorporate self-care into our lives. There's a link here. There'll be a link at the end of the slides as well. But it provides a nice framework as we start to look at the different ways we can incorporate self-care into our lives. Too far again. So within this guide, they kind of list these 8 dimensions of wellness. And I think that these are really the key areas where we can start to think about self-care. I think it's important to think like at no one time is all of this going to be equal. I think there's many times in our lives where one area is going to be much more important than the other areas. And throughout our lives, these priorities may change over time. I think what could be good for us today may not be what's best for us or what is important to us as we move forward or in 5, 10, 15 years from today. So we're going to take a little bit closer look at the 8 dimensions of wellness. I think when we start to think about self-care, I think there are specific parts or specific domains here that we tend to think about. I would highlight, like, I think emotional, physical, spiritual, like those are all kind of real common areas that I think most people, when you start to talk about self-care, those are the areas that they think about. I would pose, and I think that this guidebook really helps to highlight there are other parts of our lives where we can incorporate self-care into it. I think when we start to think about like our financial situation, finances tend to cause a lot of stress for people. And so what are things that you can do to help you feel more comfortable or confident in your financial situation? That's kind of part of that self-care aspect that we start to think about. Spirituality, I think, again, is very important to a lot of folks. It doesn't necessarily have to mean religion, but what are ways that we can be in touch with our spiritual side? Um, Environmental, I think, is another big one. As I was working on the presentation and thinking about it, it's one area that I don't think we pay enough attention to sometimes. I think, I know at my house, there's a corner of my house where things build up in old mail, shoes, things that I just don't know where to put them away. And it's amazing to me how much stress it causes me. And when I spend time to put those things away or address them and it's kind of cleaned up and picked up, it does have a physical impact, emotional impact on my well-being. And so I think thinking about all of these 8 dimensions and how are different ways that we can think about them in terms of our own self-care. I think for a lot of us, there are many different barriers to getting self-care done. I know earlier somebody said when they think about self-care, it's hard. Self-care is hard. I think life gets in the way. We have busy schedules. We are taking care of children. We're taking care of parents. We're taking care of our partner. We have our social demands. We have work demands. We have our medical appointments. There are so many different things and barriers that get in our way of doing self-care. Are there any barriers that you think that I did not mention on here that are barriers to you doing self-care? Feel free to put them in the chat. I think it's helpful to know, what are the barriers? What are the reasons why I'm not able to focus on myself? So I think it's important that we start to think about or talk about self-care a little bit differently. Again, I said it earlier, self-care, it's always evolving. Things change. what works for us today may not work for us tomorrow, may not work for us next week. I'm looking at some of the barriers in the chat, and yes, physical energy, that is definitely something that gets in the way. Illness, mental barriers, lots of different things are barriers. And so when we start to think about it, it's again what works for us. It's not what is working for our friends, not what's working for our family members. It's really thinking about individually what are things that I can do to provide some peace or calmness for myself. I don't think it needs to cost money. I think there are things that we can do that are self-care that we may not consider being self-care. I think that social media in particular has a lot of positives as well as a lot of negatives, but I think people think when they're scrolling through social media, like self-care has to look a specific way, that you have to go on this nice vacation, you have to participate in this yoga retreat, you have to go find this isolated spot in the woods. I think there are many different ways to do self-care. It doesn't have to be indulgent, um, and it's often not indulgent. I also think a lot of people think that it is selfish when you take time for yourself, when you take time away from your other responsibilities to take care of yourself, that people feel it's selfish. I actually don't believe self-care is selfish at all. Um, and I also don't think it needs to happen in an isolated environment. I think you can do self-care with other folks. It's really about figuring out what are those things that fill up your cup, that help you get through the day, that help you manage stressful situations. So again, as we start to think about or reframe how we are thinking about or talking about self-care, these are things that can be simple. They can be things that are done in your own backyard, things that are happening already that you're doing, that you can consider being self-care. This is probably my favorite slide on my whole slide deck because it has a picture of my late dog, Reggie. He passed away earlier this year, but one of the things and the reason I kept this slide, I think that our animals teach us a lot about self-care. Not only are they helpful for our own well-being, um, but I think, you know, there are things that Reggie used to do that helped me realize that doing self-care is actually good for ourselves. And so, he used to always want to go on his walk. So I got out and walked with him at least 3 times a day. When he was ready for bed, it didn't matter what we were doing. He would just get up and put himself to bed. And so, he took care of himself. I think it's appropriate for all of us to take care of ourselves. And so, again, think about, are there lessons, are there things that are happening in your life already that you know are self-care or that you can reframe to think about being self-care? So as we kind of start to dive into kind of self-care and kind of the impact that cancer has on our self-care, again, I think cancer impacts all 8 dimensions of the wellness that we've been talking about. There's clearly changes to folks' financial situations. I think you have to take time off of work. You may not be getting paid for that time off of work. You now have all these medical appointments that you're either paying for additional bus fares or additional gas to get back and forth, for parking. Finances take a big hit when you're diagnosed with cancer or when cancer enters your life. Your spirituality might be questioned. There are going to be physical changes to your body, mental changes, things that are impacted. And I really think that the social impact of cancer is huge. There are so many changes in personal relationships when cancer enters your life. And, I've been doing this work for over 20 years and it has been present since day one. I've been hearing about the impact to personal relationships. And it was interesting. I was reading this article the other day with this new term that I hadn't heard of before called cancer ghosting. And I thought, wow, finally somebody really kind of hit the nail on the head of there are so many times where people in your life just disappear when you're diagnosed with cancer or when a loved one is diagnosed with cancer. And it is very challenging. It is something that you don't expect. You think you have these great relationships, great friendships, great family relationships, and people just aren't present. And so, I really wanted to highlight that these are real impacts in the ways that cancer does impact kind of your ability for self-care and just kind of all those dimensions of wellness. So, and again, kind of not only does cancer impact self-care, but it also impacts us at work, right? And I think this is where Cancer and Careers does so much great work, but it's part of doing the self-care is thinking about, okay, how does this diagnosis impact me at work? And what are things that I can do to address the concerns or worries that I have? Um, I think a lot of folks after a diagnosis or after cancer enters their life, it's how do I get support? Is it appropriate for me to ask support? If I ask for support, will they lay me off? So I think there are so many different questions and concerns that do come up. Um, are my coworkers going to look at me differently? Are they going to talk behind my back? Or are they going to think that I'm not able to do my job? What's that going to look like? And so all of these things start to come up once cancer enters our life. And part of addressing them is taking care of yourself. So again, it's really thinking about, okay, what do I do if my coworkers treat me differently? What does it mean if I call out sick? What does that look like? Who is there somebody there I can talk to? Is there somebody that I can get support from to help me understand what this looks like? That's considered self-care. And so that's why I put this slide in there. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to switch to the next slide. There we go. Went a little too far. So I think that as we're thinking about self-care, what are the different ways that we can do self-care? And so I like to break it down into three different types of self-care. There's self-care that we do just kind of in the moment. There's self-care that we do that become habits or are ongoing things that we do to help take care of ourselves. And then the third type I talk about are protective self-care. So in the moment, it's just kind of like what it says. These are things that we address as they arise. Acknowledging emotions and feelings when they happen, or doing little things in the moment to find joy, create happiness. I think, you know, when you're with a friend, if they say something that just doesn't sit right, I think a lot of us have a tendency to sometimes just move on from it and not acknowledge it. And then maybe later at night, we're consistently thinking, oh, I wish I would have said something or done something. It's okay to say, in the moment, hey, that hurt my feelings when you said this, or hey, something about that doesn't feel right, but can we talk more about this? Um, Really, I think when we address things, when we get them out, it's a really great way to kind of take care of ourselves and not have those things creep up later in the day or at night or in a week. Um, Also, just finding little things in life that can bring you joy or happiness. I think going back, like I loved going on walks with my dog. I didn't realize how much that filled my cup in the moment. Um, Other things that I know that I really enjoy doing, I'm a big ice cream fanatic. And so when I go out and I see an ice cream store, just going and getting a little bit of ice cream always makes things a little bit better. Again, these are real simple things. I've been looking at the chat, watching TV, listening to music. I always have music playing at my house. It's just helpful for me. It calms my nerves. Stepping away from work, if you have the opportunity to on a little break, go get some fresh air. Again, these are things that can be easily accomplished, don't take a lot of time. One of the things I put in here also is responding to an email when you read it. It's one of the things I am worst at. I have coworkers here. I have friends who they have an in basket or an inbox that has zero emails in it. I have about 150 unread emails right now, just because I'm not good at addressing them when they come in. or when I read it. And I always think I'm going to get back to it and I forget, and then I'm always behind on something. So something as simple as just when you read an email, if you respond to it at that time, it actually is pretty rewarding and helpful in addressing kind of some of the stress that we can feel. When we're thinking about kind of the ongoing or habitual kind of self-care. I put in here healthy eating. I always get stressed when I put healthy eating in a presentation like this. I want to be very clear. I do not think that this is about restricting or avoiding certain foods. I think when we think about healthy eating, it's about thinking in moderation. Again, I just said it. I love ice cream. I can't have ice cream for every meal, but I can have it every so often. It is fine. Again, this healthy eating is not about restricting or avoiding. It's just about making sure you're doing it in moderation. Is there a way that you can plan your meals, your lunches ahead of time that helps to remove some of that stress? Um, and I also think it's important to think about or track which foods what foods you are eating and how they are impacting you. You know, when I was younger, I used to be able to have a candy bar for dessert. I can't do that anymore because I get that real quick sugar high, and then the rest of my afternoon, I'm really sleepy and exhausted. And so it's really about, again, understanding the way that food impacts you and how you feel. And so that's kind of the idea around the healthy eating. It's not about restricting or dieting or those different types of things. Other things, engaging your body and mind. I think, some people talked about going on a hike or getting out of the house. Those are really great ways to create ongoing or habitual self-care movement. I think getting outside, fresh air, whether if it's not going outside, is there something you can do at your desk? Just little things that you can do to help make yourself feel better. And again, it's thinking about what are the things that work for you. It's not about what somebody says is a good idea or what things. It's really about figuring out the things that work for you. Um, you know, I saw a lot about naps and sleep. Great. And then meditation. I think meditation, it's a tricky word and a tricky practice. I think for a lot of people, myself included, when I hear meditation, I'm like, that's not for me. It's not something that I can do. Um, it's interesting. I was working with somebody, and they taught me a little bit more about meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be about fully clearing your mind. It's more about sitting in, embracing kind of those racing thoughts. So for me, when I think about meditation, it's like this quiet, peaceful, you have to not think about anything. Um, I actually do not think that that's what meditation is. I actually think it's about acknowledging kind of the feelings that come up when you try and sit in that peaceful, quiet spot. And so for me, I often will get racing thoughts or lots of things coming into my head of, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. When I try meditation, I just say, those thoughts start to come up. I say, okay, hey, I hear you, you're there. We'll get to it when I'm done. And so it's okay to embrace those feelings. And meditation, I think, can just be about finding that quiet, peaceful time to sit and relax with yourself. It's not about clearing your mind. Um, so just some different things that you can do for ongoing or habitual self-care. And then there's the ideas that we have um, for protective self-care. I think I'm going to get a little bit more into a good friend and colleague of mine, Julie Larson, introduced me to this concept of the FDRs, the feeling, doing, respite, and spiritual groups of folks. We'll get more into that because I want to spend some time on that because I think it's a really interesting and useful tool to think about for protecting ourselves. Um, but we hear a lot about boundary setting, what limits are you willing to put in place? What boundaries do you need in your life to feel better about things? And then also just, again, self-awareness. How is this making me feel? Are there things I can do to avoid feeling this in the future? Are there things I can do to help get back to this place or this feeling again? Or are there ways that I can remain in this kind of space? So going back to kind of the FDRs, the feeling, doing, respite, and spiritual, these are really a way to classify the people in our lives. Um, it helps us to understand what their limitations are and what I can get from them. And I think that this is a great way to help us understand or know who to go to when there are specific things that we need in our lives. So when we start with the feeling folks, the F in the FDR's feeling, these are people who we can be really emotionally open with. Um, we've we don't have to edit ourselves. We don't feel judged. We don't feel embarrassed. We don't feel misunderstood from them. These are the people we can kind of talk about with anything. I think for a lot of us, we feel like we have a lot of these people. In reality, I think that most people can count on one hand how many feeling friends that they have. It's unfortunate, but it is usually we have the least amount of feeling friends or feeling people in our lives. And when we start to think about this, I also like to think about it when we're talking about at work. So, is there somebody at work that you can talk to or process things with? If not, it's good to know that so that you can then have somebody who is outside of work, that if you're feeling very emotionally charged about something, you can go to them outside of work instead of oversharing with somebody at work that could, have some implications in the future for your work. So again, that's the feeling, friends. Um, the D is our doing. These are folks who we can count on for doing something for us. Again, I highlighted some of these things: laundry, childcare, cooking, yard work, cleaning. These are tend to be the people who we have a lot of. These are the folks who will set up, a meal train or help us with carrying bridge. All these different things. They're the ones who are willing to maybe drive you to and from a treatment. We tend to have a lot of these people. Um, and they're really good at doing stuff, but they're not necessarily good at listening or support, or on the flip side of it, getting our minds off of things, kind of what the friends, the respite part is. Again, these are people at work that you can count on to help you when you have a specific task um, or a project that you're working on that maybe you need some assistance with because you have to go to a doctor's appointment or you have some side effects that you're coping with, that they are the ones who can kind of sometimes help fill in the gap while you are not at work. And then finally, we have our respite. I put in kind of parentheses. These are like our fun friends. These are the people in our lives who really are there for distraction. They are the ones who will take us out. We'll go out, do something fun, really get our mind off of things. They don't want to deal with any of the emotional things. They're not great at doing things for us, but they are provides some escape from kind of the everyday issues or concerns or worries that we're dealing with. When we think about it at work, these are the folks that we can laugh with. Maybe there's somebody that we share a common interest with that we can talk about that with. Um, or again, has a pet or a child that you enjoy hearing about. And so um, we tend to have the most fun friends, fun people in our lives who really want to distract. And so I think, again, as we go back to kind of what I mentioned earlier and the ways in which cancer impacts our social situation, when we start to categorize these folks, we can start to understand what they're capable of and go to them when we need something specific. You don't want to go to uh, one of the respite friend for an emotional concern that you're having. They're not going to meet your needs, and it's going to end up being very frustrating for you. You're not going to feel heard or supportive. But if you go to the emotional friend for that emotional support, that's where you start to feel cared for. And then finally, again, the spiritual friends doesn't necessarily have to mean any part of organized religion, but it helps to provide community, helps to provide some kind of, if you are questioning faith or have a spiritual crisis, these are really the folks that help you with kind of understanding the purpose and meaning behind things. And so I'd like to add those in because I think that they are equally as important as all the other ones, but not necessarily important to everybody. So just wanted to put that one in as well. I think again, part of self-care is building these habits, again, specifically for the ongoing or habitual, but also I think for kind of our protective self-care, um, letting go of behaviors or habits that aren't working for you. What are things that do work for you? Are there things you want to let go of or not? Having some self-awareness. What am I feeling in this moment? Is this something that I want to come back to? Is this not? Um, am I able to regulate kind of how I am feeling? Am I going down this rabbit hole of talking negatively about myself? That's not typically helpful. And so just being aware and cognizant of when these things are happening, again, I don't think, or what I don't want to get across is that you can't have negative self-talk or you can't have a wide range of emotions. That's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is like when those things come up, what are things you can do to change some of that behavior? We're going to have negative self-talk, and that's okay because we can grow from those situations. But sometimes it can feel really bad and not good for ourselves. And so, are there things that we can change um, or alter that kind of that talk? There's always going to be setbacks. You can go into this with the best of intentions, and things are going to ebb and flow. That is okay. Again, this is all personal. This is all kind of what works for you and what doesn't. And sometimes what works for us today may not work for us tomorrow, next week, next year, or 5 years down the road. Go one too far. Nope. Sorry about that. And then when we start to think again about work and how do we integrate work or self-care at work, I think there's lots of different ways or things that we can do. You know, again, talking to our coworkers or our supervisors, our bosses about any accommodations or things that we may need due to cancer being in our lives, that could either make work easier for us or more effective. Sometimes I think we can get really complacent at work, and it's very easy to do the same things over and over and over again. Are there ways that you could challenge yourself? Is there something that you could do that would help to make you feel like you accomplished something? Could that be transferring to a different job at work? Again, maybe you're or maybe you need something to be a little bit easier or harder. So maybe you're the host of the restaurant you work at and you want to be waiting tables, so you asked to make that shift, or vice versa. You are waiting tables and you want to try something different, and so you asked to be the host. Um, you know, what are there training opportunities? I always think it's really great to learn new skills, new tasks. And so just figuring out what opportunities are available to you at work to help you feel like you're growing or improving. Again, when we look at those 8 dimensions, one of them is intellectual. And so I think addressing those different types of things is also very helpful to folks. I also think it's important. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to step away or, um, you know, change things up at work, but we do get breaks, right? And so how can we make breaks work for us? You know, if there's some rigidity in our job, what are the things we can do while we are there to help us feel better? Um, you know, put some things up here. Again, these are just ideas or suggestions. There may be other ideas or thoughts that you all have. Um, you know, thinking about what you're going to be doing outside of work that day or that night could be a good opportunity to help take care of yourself. Is there somebody at work that you want to have lunch with? Maybe having lunch with them, or is there somebody that you on you during your lunch break you want to call on the phone? Again, these are just different ways of stepping outside of what is currently happening to try and help take care of ourselves. Again, there's technology, there's all these different apps out there to help take care of ourselves, to help do some self-care. Um, I said it a little bit earlier. I think social media, there's a lot of great things about social media. There's a lot of great community building things, a way to connect with a broader community. There's also some downfalls and pitfalls. And so just be aware of how social media is impacting you. Is it making you feel happy, envious, connected, what is going on, and really looking at seeing, is this being helpful or is it not? And then again, modifying any behaviors that could be harmful or could improve your kind of emotional state. Again, connecting with supports, there's lots of good support groups out there. I am always very cognizant of letting any of the patients or families I know of when they are searching for online support, to be very mindful that often those are not facilitated by any sort of mental health professional. And I do think oftentimes when people are reaching out to online communities, they tend to be in a space of crisis. And so sometimes you do hear lots of very hard or challenging or scary information in the online forums, that represent a very small portion of what the community may feel. And so just being mindful and aware of those different types of things. And then again, there are different types of external support. We can start to look at our community, family, friends, coworkers, again, utilizing the FDRs to help us understand what are opportunities for us or resources for support. And then additionally, there's always professional levels of support as well if you need any help or guidance. And working on like your self-care, I think there's counseling support groups, etc. I'm a hospital-based social worker, so I think we're a great resource as well, and can help connect you guys to any local resources that may be helpful. And for those who don't know, Psychology Today actually has a great resource called Find a Therapist. You can input your city and state or your zip code, and it will pull up a list of folks in your area who are therapists, and you can kind of filter it through kind of your insurance, kind of any concerns or worries that you're wanting to work on, all those different types of things. It's a really great and useful tool. And here's just some of the resources that we talked about. You know, I always like to put Brene Brown in here. She's a social worker, so I like to support her in that way. But she also, I think, is a great um, speaker on boundary setting, lots of different things. I just find her to be incredibly helpful in reframing it. Sometimes the things that I'm thinking or worried about or concerned about, I think it's very helpful. Um, some of her Netflix or TED Talks have been really helpful to me. And again, just some apps and streaming services where you can find different types of support, meditation, just different things to help you guys cope or support your self care journey. And that is all for me.
Sorry, my internet has been less than ideal today. Apologies for that. Well, thank you so much, Wade. I know that I've heard this a couple of times, but each time I really do learn something new. So I just wanted to go through a couple of things before we go over to Q&A. If you have any follow-up questions, my email is on this slide, or you can feel free to email cancerandcareers@cew.org. We do hope to connect with you on social media. All of our handles here are listed here as well. And you can also sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter and visit our website. Now, today is our last webinar of 2025, but we do have a great lineup coming up next year, starting in January with managing long-term stress. Then in February, we will be presenting balancing work and cancer. And in April, we're bringing back career coach Julie Jansen to lead a session on resumes and LinkedIn. So for the complete list of 2026 dates and titles, feel free to visit our website. Registration is open and you can register for the entire year now if you'd like. And we really hope to see you in 2026. We've also excitedly expanded our Spanish webinars for next year. We have sessions on balancing work and cancer, job search, mental health, and balancing work and caregiving. So if you speak Spanish, we would love to see you there. Or if you know or work with Spanish speakers who might find this information useful, please pass it along to them. Once again, there's more information on our website, which is linked here, and where you can also register for those sessions. And we really hope that you'll join us for our Midwest Conference coming up on Friday, March 28th. This is an all-day event taking place on Zoom. In the past, it was held in Chicago, which is why it's called our Midwest Conference, but now that it's virtual, it's open to everyone. Later in the year, we also have our national conference on June 26th and our West Coast conference on October 17th. Registration's not open for national or West Coast yet, but certainly mark your calendars. And if you sign up for any of our emails, then you will receive an update as to when registration opens. And once again, these are the requirements for those of you who are seeking continuing education credits for today's webinar. Again, you'll receive an email no later than 5 p.m. tomorrow with all of this information, and you have 2 weeks to complete the evaluation and post-test. And finally, I just want to leave this QR code up on the screen as we go into Q&A. If you scan this, it's going to take you right to the evaluation. If you don't have time right now to complete, we totally understand. And again, you're going to get that link in your email. So, Wade, are you ready for some rapid fire Q&A?
I am.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple. Sorry, it's a technology day today. Okay. So someone had mentioned that yes, I agree on addressing concerns when they arise. I did, and then I got feedback that cancer patients can get nasty.
Yeah, I saw this and I am a little shocked by it because I don't agree that cancer patients get nasty. I start to go back to kind of, those protective that protective self-care and kind of really the FDRs in terms of kind of classifying our friends or the people, the relationships that we have in our lives. And so I think it can go beyond just kind of going to them for the type of support that they give. But I think also we can start to think about who are the people that we can give honest, direct feedback to kind of in the moment. Um, you know, this might be somebody that we just aren't able to be open and honest with how we feel about things because they're going to kind of react really negatively and put something on you that isn't true. And so for them to react when you give feedback in the moment that cancer patients just get nasty, it says a lot more about them than about
Mhm.
you giving direct feedback. And so I don't want people to not give direct feedback because they're scared of people's reactions but typically it's because of that person and not because of the feedback you gave. And so um, it's an unfortunate situation and I feel really bad for this person and I don't think it had to do with their feedback. I think it probably had to do with what was going on with that person at that time.
Yeah, I would agree. The first thing I thought of when I saw that was this is a them problem, not a you problem. And I hope that it doesn't deter you from addressing concerns in the future because there are bound to be some negative responses to things because we don't live in a perfect world. So it's important to just take everything with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Okay, we have another one. Starts off with a compliment. Everybody likes that. This was great. I also learned something new. What's the best way to get a mentor?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's kind of around, what are you hoping to get mentored on is kind of where I would start with that kind of my response to that. And so I think, um, if you're looking for support around kind of how to manage, you know, all these different responsibilities, um, is there somebody within your community that maybe has similar responsibilities that you could talk to? Um, are you looking for somebody to mentor, on kind of wellness or like uh, exercise journey? Like, you know, start to break it down into like what kind of support are you looking for? And then I think that that kind of will help guide where you would start to go to look for a mentor. Um, if that would make, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Nicole, or.
I mean, I think, yeah, I think it depends on what you're looking for and what kind of involvement you want them to have in you know, directing you and providing that guidance.
Yeah.
Um, we have a few more questions. I'm a caregiver for my daughter and finding it so hard to find time for self-care. I know I should be doing something for myself, but I just feel so guilty whenever I leave her for more than a few minutes. Do you have any words of wisdom that you think can help me push past this? I really want to be at my best for her, and right now I just know that I'm not at my best.
Yeah, and I know it's really cliche. I think that we, you know, say it a lot in kind of this world and the work that I do, but when you think about when you get on an airplane, or if you've ever been on an airplane, kind of the safety demonstration of putting your oxygen mask on yourself before you can help other folks. Again, if you can't breathe, you can't help other people. And so it is a really great example of if you aren't taking care of yourself, there's no way that you can be there 100% to provide support to somebody else. And so caregivers I know really struggle with this concept of I need to put myself first in order to support this person in my life. And it can be really hard. But
Hmm.
the more that you put on yourself, the more strain and stress and responsibilities you put on yourself without doing something. And it can be something small. It can be, I think somebody put in there, they like to put music on in the morning and just kind of relax. Like
Hmm.
it can be something like that. It doesn't have to be this big grand gesture of self-care. It just
Hmm.
has to be a little something that you can feel like, okay, I am recharging myself so that I can be a better caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, this is one where a lot of metaphors and analogies really work, right?
Mhm.
If your tank isn't full, you can't drive anyone anywhere, right? And so it's just really important for you to, focus on self-care and for other people as well. Okay, here. I think we have time for just a couple more. Um, Here's one. My husband hasn't been able to work during his treatment, and it's caused him to have really negative thoughts. I can tell that it's really impacting him, his self-esteem, and our relationship. I try to counter them when he says something negative to me, but he shuts me down and says that I can't understand. Do you have any advice for how to approach this in a productive way?
Yeah, again, I think that this can be really challenging sometimes because I think ultimately when we see somebody struggling, we want to be there and be supportive and try and offer or counter kind of those feelings. And I take a different approach, and I think let's sit in those feelings. Okay, like what's going on? Let's talk about it. Again, I think self-care, it's not falling back on that toxic positivity. Like everything doesn't have to be okay. Like things can be really bad, right? Things can feel really overwhelming. Like I can feel really down about having cancer and having to go through these treatments and all these side effects that I'm experiencing. Like that's acknowledge and address those feelings. And I think sometimes when we sit in them and address them and allow them to happen, it then allows us to move forward into, okay, I've sat in them. I don't like this feeling right now. What do I need to do next to help me get out of this? And so, um, you know, I think oftentimes for cancer patients, people try and make it better by saying you're going to get through this, or it's okay, or look how strong you are. instead of
Hmm.
saying, hey, this really sucks, and I'm really sorry you're going through it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think we also talk about just like often in a lot of our work, we talk about the narrative, right? And the language choices people use and the battle language and how that is a very controversial topic, right? Some people are all about the fight and being a warrior, and other people are like, do not describe my situation that way. So it really depends on the type of person, like that kind of positivity that what did they call it? Toxic positivity can really backfire for a lot of people. So it depends on the way people are feeling about certain things. And of course, if they're looking at it negatively, you don't want to necessarily feed into it, but I think you can validate it in a way where it doesn't feel like you are demeaning their situation or lessening it at all.
yeah, 100%. And I like the way that you worded that. It's not about leaning into the negativity. It's more about validating their feelings.
And I think that's really what you want to do as a caregiver in general is just like validate this situation. Yeah, this really sucks. I totally hear you. Maybe I can't understand, but I can empathize kind of
Mm.
thing. All right, I think we have time for one more question, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
Okay. Here's a good one. I'm pretty good at recognizing what I need, but I have a hard time communicating my self-care needs others, especially my colleagues and employees. Tips for having some of those conversations.
Okay. So you broke up a little bit, Nicole, but what I think you said is that I'm good at it, understanding, but I'm bad at communicating kind of what I need. Um, is that kind of what the question was?
Sorry, let me repeat it because you just broke up as you were saying it to me. It says, I'm pretty good at recognizing what I need, but I have a hard time communicating my self-care needs with others, especially colleagues and employers, because they don't seem to be receptive. Do you have tips for having those conversations?
Yeah, I think that is again, I think when we start to think about work, it can feel really difficult to say, hey, this is what I need to help me do my job better. I think we often get in this mindset of like, oh, I'm at my job to do the, this job, and that my supervisor or folks are not going to be supportive of the things that I need to help me get my job done better. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that that's sometimes in the language that we use, or maybe not so much the language we use, but the emotions that we attach to asking for help or support. Um,
Hmm.
and so sometimes I myself included, I don't want to feel like I need accommodations or I need this additional time or support or somebody to come in and help me. Um, but that's what our coworkers and colleagues are there for. That's what our supervisors, our bosses are there to kind of help us manage what we need to do to get our job done. And so, hey, if you're saying like, hey, you know what? I can work for a solid 45 minutes here, you know, at the checkout stand or waiting tables. But after 45 minutes, I just need to go sit down for 5 minutes just to catch my breath. Is that something that we could do? You know, you kind of leading with these are the things I want to do. Like, I want to do my job, I want to do it well. This is what will be helpful and supportive to me, and kind of taking that avenue,
Hmm.
I think can be really helpful and engaging of rewording it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it can be challenging to find the right words. And, I
Mhm.
think communication is something that we're all constantly working on. Just to plug one of our webinars that I think can be particularly helpful for these circumstances is our communicating effectively. It's a two-part session, and it really helps to identify what kind of communicator you are And then from there, identifying the approaches that are going to work best for that communication style. So certainly check that out if you're feeling a little iffy about, how to bring up certain conversations, how to respond to certain things, because there's certainly with a cancer diagnosis at work, a lot of nuances that need to be considered. And, it's not as easy as just saying, I don't want to talk about it or things along those lines. So, if any of you are not familiar with our swivel approach, I highly recommend checking it out. It can be really helpful in the workplace to just make sure that you are truly sharing the information that you want to share in the way that you want to share it. Um, it looks like we are exactly at 2 o'clock. I will pat myself on the back for our timing, but really it was Wade. Thank you so, so much, Wade. This is always really enlightening and insightful. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, the QR code is up for the evaluation. Please, please, please fill it out when you have the chance. They really are so important for us. And we will hopefully see you all in the new year with our continued programming. Take care, everyone, and thank you again for joining. Bye, Wade. Thank you.